All right, Josh Smith here, live in my studio, Flat 5. My guest today is a good friend and a really great musician. I mean, he's a great guitar player, but he's a really great singer and songwriter. He's also really smart. He's got a really cool, what's the word I'm looking for, enterprise with friends that he's building something very cool, and we'll get into that. But he also just has really great records, man. His new record, Noisy Feelings, I really like that record, dude. And it's a pleasure to have you on here. One of my favorite artists going, and his name is Ryan Lerman, and please welcome him.
Oh, thanks, man. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and it's been nice, getting to hang at least a little bit in the last few years and get to know each other. I hope we get to do that more in the future and play more. But I've
No
been
problem.
asking everybody kind of their path, and since we don't know each other that well, I don't know your story. And what's most interesting to me is whether you come from a musical family or not. I didn't. It was just happenstance that the guitar got put in my hands. How did it end up in your hands?
Likewise. Yeah, my parents are lawyers, so the answer is no, not
Yeah.
not musical. My yeah, my I guess my mom did sit me down at the piano pretty young, like three,
Oh.
4. We kind of had a piano in the house, and she showed me like a few things. So I guess it was in my head, but what got me going, and my dad's like a music fan, but knew how to play a couple chords on the guitar. He used to play me records as I would go to sleep, and one of them was that Clapton Unplugged record
Okay. Yeah.
in like the '90s when I was probably 6, 7, and that's what made me want to play guitar. So yeah, he took me to a music store in Santa Monica, and he rented me a nylon string classical guitar and said, if you keep this up for 2 months, then we'll see if we can buy it for you.
I like immediately the practical nature. Like, we'll rent the guitar to see if it
Yeah,
sticks. And just, yeah.
there was an inherent challenge to like, I dare you to keep this up for at least a month. I don't think you can do it. So
Uh,
I showed him.
yeah. And how old were you when that happened, when you went and got that guitar?
Probably like, geez, maybe second grade or something. How old are you in second grade? Like
Uh,
7, 8?
I think so. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
That's about when
something
I,
like
man,
that.
that's about when I started taking lessons when I was 6. So yeah, that's like first grade or kindergarten, I guess. So yeah, second grade would be like 7 or 8, I guess. Yeah.
Something in
Yeah.
there. Yeah, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah. And did you take lessons at that same place where you got the guitar?
I did. There was like, yeah, the first
Was it
song I learned
McCabe's?
was
I mean, you said Santa Monica.
no. I've asked my dad to try to figure out where it was because I was so young. All I remember is it was like one of those outdoory kind of strip malls with like a second level, and it was up on the second level. And
Hmm.
obviously, like I feel like I know all the music stores in LA now, and maybe it's not there anymore because yeah, I've tried to ask him what part of town it was in, and he doesn't remember.
Interesting.
But yeah, first song I took a lesson there, and the first song I learned was Day Tripper, and so
Really?
that was all I played around the house for the first year or so.
That's a pretty hip first tune. I mean, I could see that
Yeah,
immediately hooking you. Like the second you learn a riff like that, it's like, well, this is the coolest thing ever.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I taught it to my dad, so the two of us were just challenging each other to see who could play it better. It's fun for
Wow.
the whole family. Yeah.
Well, how long did you continue taking lessons there?
Well, I had kind of a weird like NorCal, SoCal childhood where I was born here and moved up north for like for a couple of years and moved back for like a year and then back up north. So um, I don't remember taking consistent lessons down here. Maybe I took there for a couple months, and then like the next time I sort of, let's see, is this true? I'm like thinking back. The next time I remember taking lessons is when I was like maybe 10 or 11. I had this teacher up north who I'm still friends with. His name is Chris Collins, and he's awesome. And he used to come to the house, and he had like an acoustic guitar with electric strings on it, so he could show me the electric bendy licks.
Mhm.
Um, and he was great and super inspiring, and kind of showed me like how to write songs even,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, that was kind of my early guitar playing life.
And what kind of music were your parents listening to in the house? Like, because we know that period of time what was popular, but like what was being played
Yeah.
in your house? You said Clapton already, but like what else?
Yeah, my dad was very much is very much like classic rock,
Hmm.
so like Springsteen,
Okay,
and like
good.
he loves Neil Diamond. Uh, there was like some Sinatra. I feel like I don't remember hearing any Beatles for the first time. I feel like you know what I mean, like because I heard it so young. It feels like
Right.
it's like embedded. Um,
Interesting.
yeah. So that kind of Beatles were always around, like the Stones,
That's
sort of what
very
was
similar
playing.
to my, that's my dad was very much a classic rock guy, but I was lucky like he had some jazz and blues in his record collection, so like BB King would come on, or he liked
Mhm.
Monk, so like Monk would be on, or Miles, and
Cool.
yeah, and then Bruce Springsteen, Allman
Dad is cooler
Brothers.
than my. Your dad's cooler than my dad.
He had, man, he had this massive wall of vinyl, and all we did was watch sports, but have the sound muted and have a record on, so something was on at all times, basically.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Sport muted with vinyl on. I gotta try
yeah,
that.
that's the
Kind of
way I grew
amazing.
up. I mean, and that's why, I mean, I'm a sports obsessive, and those are
Yeah,
my two, probably
I
my two
know.
favorite
So
things in the world.
you're a Clippers fan, aren't you?
I am a Clippers fan, yes.
And you grew up in LA?
No, no, I grew up in Florida. The
How'd
Clippers
you
is
become a
mostly
Clippers?
from moving here. The Clippers was from
Okay,
moving here. Um,
you're
the
just a
Heat didn't
masochist, I
exist. Yeah, there's no mascot. The Heat didn't exist when I was in Miami growing up, and then they came
Okay.
around when I was still a kid. They were an expansion team, so I rooted for the Heat, but it wasn't like ever deep seated. Like I'm a Yankees fan, obviously, because my whole family's from New Jersey and Connecticut, so I grew up a lifelong Yankees fan, like my dad. I grew up a Dolphins fan because they were already there when I was growing up in Florida, and then basketball, it was like I kind of rooted for whoever. And then when I moved here, Clippers games were cheap, so I would go all the time because
Yeah,
I just loved going to games, and I just became a
yeah.
fan when they were really terrible.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice. And so you moved here when you were how old?
22. So that was in 2002.
Did you
Yeah,
go to college for music in Florida?
I didn't go to college. I finished high school in '97, and I had already been touring and stuff in my
Mm.
summer breaks and Christmas breaks and putting out records, doing the blues thing, and so when high school ended, I knew I was gonna go straight into more gigs and more touring. So yeah, my grandparents were not happy, but my parents were cool about it. You went to college though, right?
I did. I went to USC. Yeah.
Okay, so rewinding, you're playing at home, you're taking lessons, you move back and forth from NorCal, SoCal. What's your first like gig scenario? When do you start playing with other musicians?
Oof, that's a good question. There was so basically, yeah, I grew up with like Clapton was my biggest influence.
Mm.
I like read his autobiography, got
Oh
really
yeah.
into like Derek and the Dominoes, would come home every day from school and just play along with Layla and other assorted love songs.
Mm.
And also like Stevie Ray Vaughan was huge. And like Jimi Hendrix took me a while. Like I didn't get it. Do you know what I mean? When I was a kid, I was
Mm.
like, because I was introduced to Stevie first and then heard
Right.
Jimi Hendrix. And I was like, oh, so he just took everything that Jimi Hendrix was doing, but played it a lot better and louder and faster and cleaner. And so I was like, yeah, I get that's where it comes from, but I just like didn't quite comprehend like the magnitude of like what Jimmy did until like later, kind of college.
Interesting.
Um, yeah. Um, but yeah, so I was very much like blues guy. I had that And then high school, there was no like, there's nothing to do with blues. It was either like
Of
jazz or
course.
classical.
Yeah.
So so yeah, I took a lesson when I got to high school with this guy who was like guitar teacher, sort of at the high school, and he turned me on to Matheny and Schofield.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember like coming, like never having heard jazz. My he was like, so he gave me these records. He's like, so what do you think? And I was like, well, I remember saying this. I was like, they have a lot of they have like good ideas, but they move on from them so quickly. It's like I was just used to guys like playing one riff over and
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
It's like they're playing too much. But after that, I got way into West Montgomery and Matheny and Schofield, and just went like deep down the jazz hole
So you
in
weren't
high school.
listening to any other jazz before that guy turned you on to Matheny, huh? And Schofield.
No,
That was like the
no, I
intro.
had I had like Kind of Blue. I had I had like three Miles Davis like CDs,
Mm,
but I didn't understand. I didn't get it, and like it didn't particularly like appeal to me until I heard like the guitar
yeah.
aspect of it.
Hmm.
So I was like typical guitar jazz guy that only listened to jazz guitar players for a while.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Okay, so you mentioned school, and yeah, it's like jazz and classical. So I went to a performing arts high school, and it was pretty much the same. We actually had a rock band too in the high school, but
that's
um,
cool.
at this point I was already gigging, so it was like it was great to play guitar at school, but it was also like I didn't want to be told like what to do because I felt like a real musician already, which is ridiculous.
Right.
But but did you have a lot? Did you play a lot at school, or was it something you weren't
I
really
did.
involved in high
I
school?
just realized I didn't even answer your question about the gigging. So there was a restaurant called the Seafood Peddler in Santa Fe where I grew up,
Okay,
which is now you might have played there, Terrapin Crossroads.
I think I might have played there before. Yeah.
So Phil Lesh bought this restaurant. I went to high school with Phil Lesh's son. Phil Lesh, bass player for Grateful Dead, and
Uh
his
huh.
son Graham was one of my best friends in high school. And this seafood restaurant off the freeway, there was this woman that played like jazz piano by herself, and she let me like in high school as I was learning jazz. She just let me play with her. So like once a week, I would I just play like standards with her, and then we would like in high school. My buddy Jack Conti, who is in we have Scary Pockets now. He we were in a band because I met him when he was a senior and I was a freshman,
Okay.
and so we kind of started this band together my freshman sophomore year called Dopamine, and we would do, after he went to Stanford. So when I was a sophomore, he was a freshman at Stanford, and we would do
Mm,
like Stanford Battle of the Bands, and we would do like my, high school talent show and all that stuff.
right. Wow. All right. So I
But
didn't even know that. You,
there wasn't
go
a
ahead.
lot musically like happening, and you know what I mean. Like I didn't feel like I didn't know a lot of people that were like into music that I could play with. Like it was kind of just like me and Jack, really.
Yeah, interesting. I had nobody basically my age that I hung around with and played with, and it's what I think even pushed me further into blues was because it was a place where I could go play with adults, and it was like
Mm,
they kind of accepted me from a young age, and if I could have found young kids, to play with, I would have much preferred it probably, but it made I don't
right,
know. It's partially responsible for how I ended up, I think for sure. Yeah.
right.
Oh man, so you were playing with this woman playing piano, just doing real book tunes and stuff, just standards.
Yep, just
Nice.
standards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so when you finish high school, is there even a thought of college? No college? What was your parents' attitude on the subject?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, no college was not an option. It's not like there was anything else that I would have done if I hadn't gone to college.
Hmm.
So yeah, I went to college. I applied. We went to this sort of like this private school in high school in Marin where like there was like 80 kids in my class and like 15 of them went to Ivy League school. So I was feeling the fierce competition and I thought,
Okay.
well, if I'm a music guy, I'll set myself apart from the rest of the class. So I applied to USC as a music major, and then thinking that when I got there, I'd switch to something more practical that my parents would approve of. And then I tried to do that once I got there, and they said, no, you have to reapply to like the business school if you want to switch majors. So I said, fuck it all. I can get good grades playing the guitar. I'll just do that and see. I can still
Wow.
go to law school, is what I was thinking at the time.
It
And then
is.
I
So you
started
were
touring.
thinking that you were thinking following in your parents'
Yeah,
footsteps.
yeah. I never really thought that I was like good enough to like really making a career out of. I didn't know how that would be possible. Me making a career out of it. So yeah, it wasn't until I started touring like after my junior year that I kind of saw like a pathway forward as like, okay, well, I at least know that I can be like a sideman, and then I'll just
Right.
keep writing songs, and not, you can't fail if you never stop trying. That was like my mindset.
That is it. I mean, the mindset is a really important part of it. It's like, that whole having a backup plan or not thing. If when you don't have one,
Yeah,
you're left with no choice but to succeed.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my dad. I forgot that I had said that, but I talked to my dad recently, and he reminded me that they were trying to talk me into having a backup plan, and and that exactly what you said was my mindset. It's like I don't want a backup plan because then I won't follow through, or
Right.
burn the boats to take the island.
And when you started to do the sideman thing here in LA and get called for gigs while you're still in college, what did your parents think then? Like when you started to, maybe make a little bit of money playing the guitar, what was their opinion on it?
I think once I graduated, there were like a couple serious talks about like, are you sure you want to do this? And
Mm,
my conviction was so strong that I think they didn't try that hard. I think they tried like the amount that you should try to discourage your child from becoming a professional musician,
right.
like the responsible amount. And then
Yeah.
they were like, my mind was pretty set that I was doing it, and I think once they saw that I was supporting myself, I mean, to be fair, I did move in with my grandparents after college,
Okay. All
so I
right.
was supporting myself. They didn't have to. They never had to send me money for anything.
Right.
But yeah, I was sort of like touring, and then when I was home, I was at my grandparents' place, just like recording and writing, and I did that for yeah, like 4 or 5 years after graduating.
Right. And did you enjoy the sideman stuff? Like it's for me, I did basically 10 years of nothing but that, and I did enjoy
Yeah, me
parts of
too.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but did you really like it, or was it a means to an end?
Man, I would love to hear your answer to this question as well. But um, I I really liked it. I really liked it. I mean, I love the camaraderie of touring. Do you know what I mean? Like the first tour that I did was playing guitar for Joshua Radin, and Vanessa Carlton was opening. So I would
Hmm.
play duo with her, and then I would play in Josh's band. And and yeah, it was like I so my mindset, like in college, I was trying, like I was still really trying to be like a proficient like jazz guitar player.
Right.
So, and I never felt like I always felt like I was knocking on the door of like literacy or fluency, but like had never totally felt like, man, I'm just nailing this. Like I'm on the level. Um, so to go out and like be able to travel with like, and I was like this young kid, like 20, 21. Everyone else in the band was like 34, 35. And so to be in that position, like on a bus and traveling, and like the music was, good
Yeah.
enough.
Right.
Um, but but yeah, and then to get paid for it and to have such a good time and feel like I was like taken under these guys' wings, it was just like this whole my whole world sort of possibilities sort of like opened up that like okay, like I might not be able to be Kurt Rosenwinkel right now, but like I can
Right.
definitely do this. And
Yeah.
there's, this is fun. So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. The initial part is always like mind blowing. So for me, I had done a lot of touring already, doing my own stuff, and you're talking I'm a really young kid at that point. So by the time I
Yeah.
got to 22 years old, I had been full time on the road from 17 to 22. That's all I did
That's
was live
so
in a van.
crazy, man.
Yeah, the
So
second I
I mean,
graduated high school, that
I
was
knew
it.
you were kind of like blues prodigy kid along, like you were hanging out with Derek Trucks and
Yeah.
whatnot when you guys were
Yeah.
little, right?
Yeah, like Derek and I used to play together a lot when we were, 13 years old, 14, and
So
so
crazy.
so yeah, I would be out there. I was putting out records. I was touring, and by the time I was 22, it sounds ridiculous, but I kind of hit the wall. Like I needed a break from
Yeah.
number one. I wasn't making any money, but it didn't matter. I
Were
lived with
you
my
writing? Were you
parents.
writing too, or were your
I was.
records
Oh yeah, no, I was writing. It was
okay?
all original tunes. I had a
Were you
vision, for what I
contemporary of
wanted
like
to do.
Johnny Lang, like
Yeah, it was
that kind of
Johnny
stuff?
Lang,
Yeah,
Kenny Wayne Shepherd. Um,
yeah,
they were doing better than Derek, and I were at that time,
right.
better than Bonamassa was doing. There was a time Joe and I would say we were in the equal level,
Uh,
because yeah, Johnny and Kenny were doing so great, and I thought, oh, well, my time's coming because Johnny and Kenny got signed, and I'm going to get signed, and
right.
that's kind of what made me kind of just hit the wall. I turned 22. I met who was going to be my wife, my future wife, and I wanted to be like an adult. And I thought then at the time, maybe the difference between me and all these other guys was maybe I was a better guitar player. Maybe I could go just be a guitar player. Maybe I'll take a break from this. So I came to LA literally just sight unseen. I had no idea what I was going to do. And it took a
Wow.
while, but I started to get gigs, and then next thing I knew, I was going on the road, just like the same scenario you just played out. You get a gig, and
Yeah,
you go on a bus for the first time with a guitar
yeah.
tech, and
What were those
and it's
gigs for you? Like, what? Who were you playing
yeah.
with?
So the first gig I got with this guy Ricky Fonte, who was on Virgin Records, and he was doing soul like throwback soul music, way ahead of the curve, like way before Amy Winehouse and everybody else was doing it, and he was actually really good, but it never hit for him. But we've all done those gigs with like major label artists, at least back then, where you go on the radio tour with them and play every morning in a
Uh,
radio station, and then
yeah.
yeah, all the TV shows, all it's just promotion. It's basically all promotion. And yeah, I remember doing those gigs and feeling like, wow, I'm an actual like musician now. I'm not just like
Yeah.
blues guy. I'm a regular musician, and so I'm super thankful for like that 10 years of doing all the sessions I did and all the sideman stuff. It made me a way better musician. Made
Yeah.
me way more diverse and all that, but I missed like doing my thing like tremendously.
And like, were you taking lessons for a long time, or did it just come easily and you were self-taught?
I took lessons from 6 till about 12 or 13, and I switched teachers a few times. Like my first guy was a jazz guy, my next guy was a full-on blues, like middle-aged blues guy, and then the last teacher was like a shredder, like an Eddie Van Halen guy, but he
Nice.
knew a ton
Did
of
he teach
theory.
you how to do that?
Yeah, I wish, you know, and but he was really good on just hammering theory into me. He was really good at that and
Gotcha.
fundamentals and stuff.
Yeah.
And but man, by the time I was 13, I was gigging quite a bit. So much so that
Hmm.
that was really the biggest impetus between my growth. Not the lessons anymore, it was the gigging and the application. And so I just
Yep.
dove further into that when that became the option.
Nice.
Yeah. But man, the one thing about the sideman thing that got to me quickly after the first few years, and then then I started touring with like, American Idol winners, like we all do here in LA, all the shit that we
Yep.
do. Um, and it was like, man, that feeling of you come home from a year almost of work maybe with somebody where you've
Yeah.
toured 8 months, and you've done TV and you've done this and that and you had a good year, and then you have like 9 months where you make no money, and you play local
Yeah.
gigs.
Oh yeah.
And I repeated that cycle enough times to where it was like, I don't think this is for me anymore.
Yeah.
Did
Totally.
you did you feel that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So my path was sort of I did that tour that I mentioned when I was still in school, got out of school, and then I started like pretty quickly. I did this audition and got started playing with this band called A Fine Frenzy,
Hmm.
which was this girl, like redhead singer songwriter Allison Sudol, who is now she was awesome, like really good, like great singer, and like we became friends, and her music was good. Like she made a bunch of cool records, and then now she's in those Harry Potter spin-off movies. So she's
Oh,
become like
really?
this kind of famous like actress, which is awesome.
Wow.
But yeah, so I toured with her for almost 2 years. That was my first, like we went everywhere, sort of like around the world, kind of like
Hmm.
festivals, just kind of like mid-level
Yeah.
touring, like 1,000-person room, 1,500-person rooms, nothing crazy, but like you go everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and in that band, that was the first time I played bass. She didn't during the audition. She didn't like any of the bass players, so she asked me and another guitar player to split that chair. And
Oh.
I was like, ugh, I don't want to play the fucking bass. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll try to play them. So I played a couple songs on bass. He played a couple songs on bass. The drummer like played a song on the bass. We just kind of like, shared the bass. And then from there, I started playing with Ben Folds, who
Also on
doesn't play
bass,
with,
right?
yeah, because Ben
Yeah.
doesn't have a guitar player. So my friend Jack actually recommended me to play with Ben because Ben had met Jack, and at like a music conference, they did a song together. Ben asked Jack to play with him because Ben's bass player had just quit,
Hmm.
or got fired, or I don't know what happened. Uh, and Jack doesn't really play bass, so Jack told me like, "Hey man, if he asked me to play bass, like you could definitely do this."
Right.
Um, so I lied and told him that I played the bass, and he said, "Great, I don't really do auditions, so we'll just start touring. Here's the dates." And yeah, so I went. I didn't even own a bass at that time. I went to Guitar Center and bought a bass and an amp, and I literally I made a Spotify playlist of every single Ben Folds song because I didn't really know his music at that point, and
Uh-huh.
just dove, like I went hard on, like I took a couple lessons with Jerry Watts, who you probably
Oh,
know,
yeah,
and,
absolutely. Yeah.
I remember like that first lesson, Jerry was like, "So, who are you playing with?" And I was like, playing playing with Ben Folds, and the look on his face because of how I couldn't even play the bass. He was just like shocked that I was doing that gig. So yeah, I had, as you can understand, severe deserved imposter syndrome, and yeah, so basically just like transcribed the bass notes on every single recording that he had made, so I could play the bass, like the exact bass lines from the record of every song.
Right.
And that's kind of how I started until I eventually
Yeah.
figured out how to play that instrument.
That's
But
crazy.
then, sorry, I keep not answering your questions. To I got home from that tour. That was like I was with Ben for maybe 2 years, and I was like 25, 26, and went through exactly what you're talking about, where I had just put out my first record, and I had
Hmm.
just done all this touring, and I got to this place where like, okay, I've been releasing songs on YouTube, but like I had kind of like spent the money that I had made touring, and I had this girlfriend who like I had to remember having this talk with her where I told her like I can't really afford to keep buying all of your food because I'm not making, I'm out of money. And do you mind if we kind of split the meals like for a while until and she was like, okay. Uh, but yeah, I remember like having this lull where I'd experienced like a little bit of like success, um, and then like being 25 and 26 and just feeling like nothing was happening,
Yeah.
and like I wasn't making money anymore, and I was again like sort of reconsidering my like conviction, and yeah, I had like it's like a tough year or so where I was trying
Yeah.
to figure out like exactly like what is my thing and how should I be spending my time?
Yeah, it's a weird feeling, because we've all been on that tour that's like you stay in fucking Four Seasons hotels and you
Yeah,
you play on David Letterman and fucking you
yeah,
flying first class, and then you come home and it's like, yeah, literally months and months go by where you make no money.
nothing, no
And I
money,
realized
nobody,
this
the
could
phone's
be
not
my
ringing.
life. It was like this could be the next 30 years of my life if I don't watch it. Like
Yeah,
it will be me waiting for phone calls and emails and then having a great time and then again me waiting for phone calls and emails, and it was
totally.
I knew I couldn't do it anymore. And it was like, as much as I felt like I grew a lot as a musician, like when I got playing with Raphael Sadiq, that was a blast. Like, great band, great music. I enjoyed it. And it was
I didn't know
years.
you did that. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, dude. I played off and
Were
on
you?
with him
So is
for,
that how you met Lamar?
oh, yeah, that's how I met Lamar. Yeah. Yeah.
And was Danny
Absolutely.
playing bass?
Danny, well, at first, yes, Danny was playing bass at first, and then Calvin
And then was
came in
Calvin.
playing bass. Yeah. And,
Dude, I saw you guys. I saw you play. You played like a New Year's Eve gig. I assume
yeah,
you were playing in that band up in like Northern California,
yeah,
and when
absolutely.
Danny and Lamar were playing.
Yeah, I
That
was
band
there.
was so good. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was like I felt like at the end of that, like, man, I won't find another gig that was that enjoyable. And
Yeah,
that one wasn't the nowhere near the best paying gig I'd ever done, but it was the most
uh-huh,
enjoyable. And it was like
right.
also this weird thing started to happen where I was getting like some sort of publicity or whatever recognition just as a guitar player and not as like my old thing anymore, not like blues and not as an artist.
Right.
And so I thought, well, I should maybe capitalize on that. It just kind of happened in a natural way where I started to do my own thing again and release records again and those type of things. But yeah, it was definitely conscious. Like, man, I don't think I can do this sideman thing forever and be like 100%
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, you're like there's so much uncertainty when that's your life. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? Because you really don't know when the next thing is coming and it's not in your control whether you get called for something or not.
And it was putting a lot, I mean, quite honestly, it puts a lot of pressure on your significant other. So my wife, she was the
Right.
rock of my family. She still is, but
Hmm.
especially
Yeah.
then when I was touring, if I had good years, we had a great year, but if I had bad years,
Right.
she had to pay all the bills. So it was very
Right.
much putting a lot of pressure on her, and I wanted to figure out a way to relieve some of that pressure,
Yeah.
which
Right.
which means being as diverse as possible, which kind of leads us to where you are now, which is as diverse as possible and finding new avenues and ways to do things that really are completely new, ways to distribute music, ways to create a fan base, an audience. I know you and Jack have been friends for a long time. When did you start to like see even just a little bit of like, oh man, this could be like a real way to not only find my own voice, but to actually like make a living in a way that I'm happy doing it. When was the first like instance where you felt that was possible?
You're talking specifically about Scary Pockets.
No, not necessarily just Scary Pockets, but just the way that, yeah, I guess maybe Scary Pockets, but the
Yeah.
way that you can maybe make a living doing something that you actually enjoy and that's yours, but in a
Yeah.
new way. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I guess to connect the dots to like the Folds thing, and then which was followed by like the year of depression.
When
I sort of
when did you meet Lamar? Was it for the John Legend thing, or did you know him before then?
I knew so Danny and his brother. And do you know Andrew?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Okay, Andrew, by the way, is like maybe my favorite guitar player.
he's a bad
Um,
dude.
yeah, he and Danny were a couple years older than me in college, and they were. I was like sort of like I did my homework and they just hung out and I, but I feel like I learned more about music from them than in any of my classes because they just always had such great taste and knew what was cool. And like Andrew introduced me to Randy Newman, which like changed my life.
Right.
And so I've always looked up to those guys. I still look up to those guys. And they had a band a couple years out of college called Inc. or Teen
Yep.
Inc.
Yeah.
And so that was the first time I saw Lamar was
Oh, okay.
playing with that band. And then yeah, so following, let's see, I was 25. I started playing. I just kind of came out of the low year by getting started playing with Michael Buble,
Yeah. Oh.
and so I did that for like a year and a half, um,
Was that
and
enjoyable?
then it was, man. It was my first arena touring. So
Yeah.
I felt like I had just sort of been climbing this ladder of like clubs and then like the sort of mid-level kind of theatery stuff. And then Folds was doing like bigger theaters in most
Hmm.
places. And then to go into arena touring with Buble felt like, okay, that was the thing when I was in college that was like my goal. It was like I saw my
Hmm.
friends, like I saw Andrew playing with Robin Thicke at the Staples Center. And I was like, man, to be like a sideman on an arena tour, like that sounds like fun.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I started playing with Buble, which was it was really fun. I mean, it's there's so many layers to every gig and like pros and cons, but for the most part, like I loved him and I loved the band and became really close with all those guys and yeah, the like musically that Chair's such a like I was kind of Swiss Army knife guy. I was playing guitar and keys. I was doing like a lot of synth string doubling shit, and I was
Oh.
singing and I was playing bongos, which they love to give me a hard time about. Um, but that was great. And then I got the call from John Legend to be his music director, um, and so we did like a 6 month or four month tour, something like that. That was he and I with the string section,
Right.
um, which is really fun. One of the most like musically satisfying gigs that I've had, just in terms of like freedom to adapt his entire thing to just a string quartet, pretty much.
Hmm.
Um, and then we added a rhythm section, which is when I don't think I really knew Lamar well before that, but I just knew I knew that band that you were in, uh, and I knew that rhythm section. So yeah, I was sort of like tasked with adding a rhythm section to like the John Legend, me, and strings, and so brought in Lamar and Danny,
Yeah.
um, and I think Cave might have been Cave and Lamar first, and then Danny, I think, replaced Cave when Cave couldn't do some gigs. Anyways, but yeah, that whole thing was a blast. Um, and Lamar's like, I just think the world of that guy, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's my favorite without question.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah. Oh, so then when does after all that stuff, all the sideman
Right,
stuff
right,
and
right.
MDing, you put out more I know you're always putting out records in between too. I mean, you're putting out solo
Yeah,
records and songs. When does, the idea of like making a living without being a sideman, when does that click for you?
totally. So this the second wave of touring, which was like I was going back and forth from Buble Legend for like 3, 4 years, And then I had a second wave of depression after that, of of let down, of like, okay, now I've climbed even further up the mountain,
Yeah.
and sort of seen what that looks like. I saw like the trajectory
Yeah.
of like, I could just do this. I could just like this. A lot of guys get a gig like this, and then
Hmm.
that's the rest of their life. Like you could tour with those guys for the next 20 years if you want to, legacy like touring artists.
Yeah.
And and yeah, I just kind of came back to like, the feeling of unsatisfaction starts to creep in. And like, if I don't feel like I'm growing, um, I'm typically just start to get like, antsy and, so that's what was happening. I was finding it like difficult to keep writing and to keep getting better while being on tour. So both those things ended. I came home and I was, yeah, kind of just like, um, I was in town. I had just met Theo. Do you know Theo Katzman from
I know who
Wolfpack?
he is, but I don't know him actually personally. No.
Yeah. So I had met. So I was having breakfast with Ben Folds, and he said, like, man, there's this band that my daughter just turned me on to. It's guys on YouTube, and like you probably know these guys. And it ended up being Wolfpack, and I didn't know them. And even when I saw the video, he like showed me a video of them, and I realized, I was like, yeah, I don't know any of these guys. After the fact, I realized I had played a gig with Theo like 6 months prior, where I was sort of winding down touring. But Ben Rose, great friend of mine, had put together this gig where it was me and Theo and Laura Mace,
Okay.
and then Ben and a bass player, and it was Nick Klingenberg. And we played like some of my songs, we played some of Theo's songs, and Laura sang, and we all sang together. And that was like this sort of like landmark gig for me, because I was sort of unsatisfied with the road. Did this gig in town, met Theo, and it was so much fun. He had just moved to LA, and it was sort of like, okay, I need to be at home doing stuff like this.
Hmm.
Um, and then realized when Ben showed me that video that like, oh, that was because Theo, when I played with him, was playing guitar and singing, and the Wolf stuff I saw he was playing drums. So he had a
All
big
right.
beard, and I didn't put it together. Anyways, so I sort of was in town more. I met Theo and started hanging out with like the Wolf guys, and then I turned 30, and the day after I turned 30, Jack was down for my birthday, and we went on this walk. And Jack was in a place where he had just started Patreon like 2 years before that, and
Right.
which was taking off, hugely successful. And Jack has, always been one of my favorite musicians, best friends. And he had this idea. He was like, because he was also a big Wolf fan, and and so he had this idea. We went for this walk, and he had like made like a deck, like a tech pitchy kind of like deck of like, what if you and I started a funk cover band? We'll record. I'll fly down one day a month. We'll record 4 songs and release them once a week, and it'll just be like, he showed me Theo has a video for his song Hard Work, where it's like, it's just the band playing it in a room, single shot on a tripod. And he was like, we'll just do this, and we'll make funk covers of pop songs. And uh and it just, yeah, it didn't take very long. I mean, it sort of felt like I'd been trying to do my thing for so long, to like mild success. Like friends seemed to kind of like what I was doing, but there wasn't
Yeah.
breaking through. Like nothing was
Right.
really happening. And and then Jack, we did that. We did sort of, Jack's idea. I put together the session, and we filmed these videos. And maybe like the sixth one that came out or something, um, or like the fourth, like it was very quick. Just like got 10 million views in like a week on
Mm.
Facebook. And it honestly felt like we had a fan base overnight all of a sudden.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and uh, and so we sort of kept doing it and refining it, and it's sort of it became like this fun synthesis of like, and a cool example of like me kind of stumbling through and not really being sure like what my thing was. Like I had this kind of music director skill set, I had this like producerial sort of skill set, I had a
Right.
ton of musician friends from touring for all those years, and as a guitar player and whatnot, I yeah, it just became this way to like use all of that and put it
Right.
together in a way that was like, we weren't trying, we had no expectations, like there was no pretense, it was just like have fun and see what happens. And um and it was just this sort of lucky like happenstance thing that happened to click and work and give us a sort of vehicle for um I don't remember exactly when it clicked that this might actually be like a profitable endeavor. Maybe
Right.
like, I mean, we definitely went into the red for the first year and a half or so. Jack and I just like spending money trying to
Right.
get the thing off the ground. But it's so yeah, maybe like a year into that, once it became like, once we started breaking even, I sort of felt like, and once we played like started playing live shows and people were like coming out, I kind of started seeing the potential um for like, just kind of seeing the future of a way that this like can grow and lift up the whole community, and like it doesn't even feel like my thing, in a lot of ways. It feels like this thing that we all do together that just lifts like the whole community up. So yeah, I definitely couldn't have planned on that happening, and I don't
Sure.
know what
Yeah.
I'd be doing if it hadn't happened, but I'm just lucky and happy that it's been fun so far.
Yeah, and I mean, man, the biggest, whatever blessing is, yeah, you just get up and do something that's really fun for work, basically.
Yeah,
There's no replacing that. Like when you enjoy what's going on, nothing else kind of really matters, quite honestly.
totally. And
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, I've learned so much from it that applies to other endeavors as well, which is like exactly what you just said. What that project, because I we'd do these recordings and I'd hear it back and there's bleed everywhere, and like coming from pristine like audio production, I was just like, this sounds like shit. This is not gonna work. And seeing people respond to it just like made me realize like, what are we doing? Like we're creating an emotion that like travels through sound and makes people feel something, and that's kind of all that matters. Is like, it doesn't matter, necessarily if you're playing perfectly or if you're recording at the
Yep.
highest
Yep.
fidelity. It's like, just if you're coming from like a genuine place and you're actually creating emotions with your friends, like that
Yeah.
kind of translates. And it
Absolutely.
taught me like the importance of like just a performance. um,
Yep.
so yeah, a valuable lesson to be learned in there.
Dude, and it's exciting to think about, like just where you'll end up taking it moving forward, because it's like, again, with anything you never know how long things will last, what the end game is going to
Totally.
be. But it's like
Yeah,
there's a lot of opportunity for to take it in cool ways and just make, continue the ride and keep it fun, basically.
totally.
Yeah.
Amen.
And that's, I mean, dude, that's what else could we ask for other than to make a living and be having fun playing music? Again, there's nothing better.
Totally.
Uh, all right.
Exactly.
Well, let me get into the 10 questions then, because that's a good place to start.
Let's do it.
All right. Number one, when you started learning and playing, what was the first thing that when you figured it out? I guess maybe it was Day Tripper, but what was the first thing that when you figured it out, um, you just you felt like you couldn't fail? Now you were so proud of yourself. You had, it was no turning back.
Yeah, man, I felt like Okay, so I remember like playing along with like Stevie Ray Vaughan or Texas Flood or whatever, and I
Mhm.
remember realizing that like I could figure out what key a song was in. You know,
Yeah, I
like
know that.
I
Yeah.
like remember figuring that out. Like, oh, anything in this scale, like this is the root. Anything in here works. And I remember like just realizing that I could like hear like a lick within a scale and then figure out how to play it.
Yep.
Um, and that was like a sort of moment
Oh, dude,
where something
that
clicked.
feeling is so amazing when it's like you find what key it's in, and then automatically you're off. You're just improvising
Right.
something. It may be a bunch of bullshit, but it's coming out
Yeah.
of nowhere.
Exactly.
I remember clearly being 10 years old and having my guitar teacher invite me to a jam with a bunch of adults, just like at a
Mhm.
backyard somewhere. And the first, like the being able to, they said, okay, this song's in A, and I had no idea what it was, and it wasn't even a blues. It was probably like Louie Louie or well, it was a blues kind of, but not a 12 bar. You know what I mean? And
Right.
but they just said, okay, go, and I could do something that worked.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no turning back after
Yeah.
that when you feel that feeling. You know? Yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally.
Awesome, man. All right, so then, what's the first solo that you ever learned note for note? Was that a thing you did? And do you
Oh
remember one
yeah.
just totally freaking you out and having to learn it?
Yeah. I remember tightrope.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I remember that was really early. I remember crossfire.
yeah,
Learned that really early. And then, do you know Julian Lage?
yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
So my dad, there was an article about him in our like local paper, and
Okay,
he was like jazz prodigy. He was,
yeah,
you know, probably like I think I'm a year or two older than him. And
mm,
it said in the article that his teacher was this guy Randy Vincent. So my dad said maybe you should study with this guy. And anyways, I ended up connecting with Julian, and I went over to his house when we were so young. I was like maybe 15 or 16, and he was maybe 14 or something. And um, he showed me this Wes Montgomery solo, uh, "Blue and Boogie." Do you know that
uh huh,
song?
yeah, yeah.
That remains just like one of my favorite solos of all time.
Wow.
He was playing it note for note, and it was so inspiring to. He turned me on to a bunch of cool shit that really influenced me. Even man, Julian as a guitar player, even being like 2 years younger than me, was such a big influence. I remember hearing him when he was like 8, playing with like on a David Grisman record, and realizing when I
Ridiculous.
was like 16 that he was better than me when he was 8 years old.
Man, did you ever get together with Bruce Foreman up there? I mean, I know you probably at USC, but up. What about up in the Bay Area?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I started studying with Bruce before he came to USC,
Okay.
um, because my friend Brady Cohan. I
Mm.
had studied with him when he was in high school, I think. Um, and yeah, so I studied with Bruce for maybe like 4 years.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Did Julian ever study with Bruce?
No, not that I know of.
I didn't know. Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I don't think they ever crossed paths.
Weird. All right. What's the first thing you play every time you pick up a guitar? Is there somewhere your hands just go automatically without
Man.
thought?
Um, yeah, is there? That's a good question. I kind of will play like chromatic. I think I kind of do that, or like run through some like beat, like I don't know. I kind of start playing some stuff like that just to get warmed up normally.
Mm.
Uh, yeah.
What about if you're in a music store and you're checking out a guitar with the intent of knowing if you like it
Oh
or not?
yeah,
Is there something you do that lets you know whether you like a guitar, like something you do to check a guitar out?
man, that's a good question. Is there something I do? I mean, I don't know if there's anything I played it. I kind of just play up and down the neck and make sure that the notes work.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. I don't know if there's a guitar testy song that I have.
I'm always checking resonance. Like, so I'll normally the first thing I'll do is this,
Mhm.
and then just like feel the body. You know what I mean, and see if I
You can
feel
tell
anything.
before you start playing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you
Yeah.
can tell by how light a guitar is. Like you
Yeah.
can tell. Just sit down with a guitar, and if you feel, if you, lots of times, man. I mean, this is like a whole other hour long rabbit hole that we can go
Yeah.
down. But
Oh.
but Mason Stoops has changed my entire world. He he introduced me to the rabbit hole that is reverb.com.
Yeah.
I don't know how long ago, but like he totally like just changed my entire. Before that, I was like, I would never buy a guitar without playing it,
Yeah.
and after doing it, he kind of like pushed me over the edge, and I realized like I've basically like sold 90% of my guitars and bought equally as many guitars over the last like 6 months, and they're all just like there's like you can tell, you know what I mean? Like the realization that like you can tell just by looking at a guitar what it's probably going to sound like, and most of the time you'll be right.
Most of the time. Sometimes though, you pick one up and it's just like, oh, this doesn't sound the way it should. Nope, this doesn't have it. You know what I mean? You just put it back.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Uh,
right.
oh man. All right, number 4. Do you
Yeah.
have anything that kind of plays in your head, like a musical narration, like when you're driving or when you're, cooking breakfast or something? So I'm hearing normally some sort of shuffle. It's always in B flat, pretty much. I'm hearing like Charlie Parker, pretty much all the time. You know what I
That's
mean?
awesome.
What is
Wow.
there anything you hear a lot of times? It just comes. You don't even realize it. It's just always there.
Oh, man. That's a great question. I've never thought about that.
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
You know what? You know what? The answer is yes. It's the theme to Indiana Jones.
No shit. Bum ba
It
da
does
da,
not. What do
bum
you?
ba da, bum
Yes.
ba da da. Yeah.
Yes. It for whatever reason I can't. That's always in my head, and
The B section.
ever
Bum ba
since
da, bum ba da da da, bum ba da.
yeah,
I
it's
love that.
always
Oh
my
man,
friend.
so good.
Ever since my friend told me the lyrics to that song.
I don't know the lyrics of that song.
Indiana fucking Jones. Indiana motherfucking Jones. Indiana fucking Jones. Bite my ball sack, you Nazis. I'm Indiana fucking Jones.
But by my ball sack, you Nazis. That's the best. Yeah,
Yeah,
I like it.
those are the lyrics. Yeah.
Wow. Well, see, Star Wars works its way into my head quite often during the day, but only the
Mm,
Imperial March. Like I just hear
right.
like yeah, all the time.
Such a great score. Yeah.
Same guy. Well, what do you know? He's pretty good, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so a B side to that question is, and I've been kind of keying on it lately and trying to take stock of what do I hear when something comes on. So, like when you're in a car and a tune comes on
Mm,
that you've never heard before, anything, some music,
yeah.
right? What's the first thing you normally hear? Is it like a counter melody? Is it an improv over the top? Is it a rhythmic idea, like a counter
Mm,
rhythm or something? Did you ever like pay attention to like what's really the first thing you hear when you hear a piece of music that you've never heard before?
yeah. Like, are you asking what do you pay attention to? What part of the song do you pay
No,
attention
no,
to?
no.
Or you're
Not
talking about,
necessarily what you pay attention to, but it could be that. But like
mm,
subconsciously, what's your like initial reaction? Like, dude, I'll be in the car and I'll notice. I'm trying to like notice it as it happens. Like if Katy Perry comes on the radio or something,
yeah,
I'll normally notice either like a harmony to her vocal, or like maybe I'll just be playing a solo in my head through the changes, ignoring
yeah,
what's
you're
going
thinking
on.
about what you would do if you were playing along with it.
To some degree, yeah. Or maybe I'll just
Yeah,
hear if it's boom, ba, boom, ba. Maybe I'm hearing da 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 ba. I'm just hearing a rhythmic pattern or something. You know what I mean? I don't know, but I've been trying to
yeah,
key into it though, and take stock of it. I guess.
totally. It's a good question. I don't know if there's one thing. I guess the first thing when I listen to something new is like I'm kind of paying attention to how it makes me feel.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? I'll like start there and then try to figure out why it's making me feel that
Oh
way.
yeah. Well, that's the
Um,
why is important, man. Yeah.
yeah, but but yeah, and then the other thing that I think I sort of do is try to anticipate where the melody is going. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
times I'll hear songs sort of that I'm not paying attention to and then get an idea for another song because I'll hear in my head where I would have gone with that melody. And like 99% of the time, it's not where the melody actually went. And then then you have a new song. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that might be my intuition is to like try to predict where the melody
Interesting.
is going. Yeah.
Interesting. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes it is just as simple as I'm thinking of it kind of like as a session guy, like what would I play right now to add to this song? I'm always kind of hearing
Mhm.
that too. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, number 5. And I don't know when this is an interesting question, but when did you feel like, or do you feel like, you started to maybe find a voice that might be your own on the instrument? Like maybe you wrote something that you felt like this is uniquely me, or maybe you stumbled upon an idea that you thought this is uniquely me, or maybe even someone else pointed it out to you. Like, dude, that thing you do when you play like this thing, like that, you should do more of that. Do you remember any
Mm.
moments like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like yeah, I wrote this here. I wrote this thing when I was like in high school where um I couldn't I didn't know what the chords were called, but it was
Mm-hmm.
this sort of like finger picky thing. And and I was sort of just using my ear and then it went here. Um and I didn't know what on any of those chords were called yet, but I sort of just like found my way through this progression, and
Right.
that sort of felt like my just like the everything that I have done since then kind of feels like it was somewhere in that progression. Do you know what I mean? Just
Yeah,
like these sort of
absolutely.
like melancholic chords, and then like I always like chords with a different note in the bass, fifth in the
Mm-hmm.
bass or whatever,
Yeah.
the diminished thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, hearing like which I guess a lot of that kind of comes from listening to Elliott Smith maybe,
Oh,
and
okay.
like the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very much my sort of writing zone. Um, but yeah, that was I remember that being a moment of like, oh yeah, that kind of feels like me.
And so when you recognize that, do you kind of make every effort to kind of push further down that lane once you recognize it?
I mean, sometimes I try to go the opposite way. Do
Mm.
you know what I mean? Just because it feels like I feel like once I write a song, like I don't need to keep writing that song. It's like,
Right. Well, it's
um,
weird for me. I tie most of my individuality as a player, the things that I think make me me, are almost 90% tied to improvisation and soloing. So,
yeah,
not just soloing, but just improvisation in general. So, not that I don't concern myself about the songs that I write, being original, but to me, they're more like I write them because I'm trying to convey a certain message or feeling, but I don't worry about like, oh, this song is too much like this or too much in this style. So it's weird. Like most of my voice, I think, is tied to improv, at least the way I think about it. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah,
totally,
yeah,
totally.
yeah. But it's a weird thing. Like I always try to make whatever decisions take me further that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How do you? I mean, man, I feel like I could we could flip this and I could interview you for 2 hours. I have so many questions, but
Right.
I don't even know if I should if I should ask questions or if I should let you do your
Sure.
thing
Yeah.
because I
No.
know we're
Sure.
running long
Yeah.
here.
You got. Go ahead, man.
How well
Yeah.
I would be curious, like especially for you, where it's so much like you had it from so young. Do you know what I mean? You could do it from so young that I'm
Mhm.
curious, like how you feel like your improvisation has evolved over the years. And that's part one. And then part two would be like, what are you thinking about um, when you're playing, and like what part of part three, what part of the way that you improvise is unique to you?
Right. Um, well, it's definitely
Well,
evolved a lot over the years. I mean, some of it has changed based on the 10 years of sideman work and playing music that I
yeah.
never would have played if I had stayed in my own zone all that time, you know? So that was a big part of me growing as a musician.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, the realization that I started to find maybe my voice, and it was the combination of factors of, you know, the love for blues and the appreciation of it, and also honestly the amount of homework I'd put into learning the history of it and all those things, and then
Yeah.
some love for jazz and love for country and love for mixing
Yeah.
these kind of techniques into one vocabulary. That's
Totally.
when I started to feel like I found like a little bit of my voice, and then
How
you
old were
know
you when all of that? Because I do feel like, man, there are so few guys who can pull off like even just, and you can do much more than that, but those three things of just like playing blues so true to its tradition, its history, and then being that deep in country and in jazz, and that sort of that unique blend is like
it's
when did all that click?
it was gradual, but certainly there were moments where it was like big moments were like when I realized it was just okay. Like hearing like Robin Ford. At first I didn't like Robin
Oh
Ford.
yeah.
Like
Huh.
I didn't dig it because I was a blues guy only, and he was
Yeah.
playing blues, but it wasn't like stinky enough for me. He didn't bend enough
Right.
strings, and I liked Albert King and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Otis Rush,
Oh
and
yeah.
it was like. But
Yeah.
then I heard Robin play with Jimmy Witherspoon and Charlie Musselwhite playing blues, like older Robin, and it was like
Hmm.
it became obvious to me. Oh no 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 no! This guy knows his shit, and he respects blues
Yeah.
as much as anybody. He loves it, and maybe
Yeah.
it's okay to like play this other stuff that I'm hearing. It doesn't mean I'm cheating on the blues. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Right.
then Danny Gatton was the other one. It was like,
Hmm.
okay, he had all this jazz knowledge and he liked the blues,
Yeah.
and then he had all this technique that was coming out of fucking left field for me, which
Right.
I wanted to learn. But then it was even more than that. It was like, no, he'll play anything anytime. It doesn't matter.
Right.
He's just
Yeah.
playing whatever he hears and feels, and there's no filter. And it's fucking okay
Yeah.
to do that. And that was
Yeah.
big too, to like, because in the blues world, it's very close minded. So, I mean, I still run into it all the time where it's like, I play too much jazz to be a blues guy or too much rock to be a blues guy, but I play too much blues to be a jazz guy. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
running into that my whole life, but I also think it is what makes me me. And like I said, I try to make
Yeah.
every choice to go further down whatever that hole is. Maybe it doesn't mean the most successful path, but at least it's my path.
Man, the success, you can't control that shit. You can't worry
Exactly.
about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I think. And then what am I thinking when I'm
Yeah.
improving? Oh, I'm trying not to think about anything. But if I
Yeah.
am thinking, it's about what chord's next. That's it. That's usually the only thing on my mind.
Do
I
you
don't know. How do you
practice
feel
that way?
about that?
How do I feel about what?
What is that? What do you think? Like I try not to think at all like I should play this scale over this chord, or I should play this interval or this interval. I try to let that shit just happen and just focus on what the actual next chord is so I can make a path. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Trying to hear through to the end of the sentence, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Is the goal.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, when I'm improvising, yeah, it's a combination of oh shit, this is happening, and and just try. I mean, honestly, just trying to be as melodic as possible and follow the phrase. But
Hmm.
I do feel like there's it's like a combination. Like there's a certain vocabulary that I feel like you just kind of develop over the years from all
Oh
that
yeah.
stuff that you transcribe that like maybe I feel like Keith Jarrett is kind of like the ultimate like that motherfucker is truly like he's totally unbridled by
Mm-hmm.
like technique. He's just like truly in the moment, like pure improvisation.
Yep.
But us mere mortals, I sort of feel like yeah, I'm probably tied to like what I can execute and the stuff that sort of feels good under the fingers, but then
Yep.
also trying to just, like be as in the moment and as melodic as I can.
Yeah, it's you're balancing between like what you really hear, what you feel, and what you're trying to convey,
Yeah,
and what you can
yeah,
actually physically pull off. You
totally,
know? Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's this like there's a decision that you can kind of like there's so much of improvising which is like mental and approach and like how safe do you want to be
Yeah.
like do
Yeah.
you want to go for some shit that like you know what I mean, like you'll be in certain situations where like you feel like just relaxed and able to
Hmm.
take like a ton of risk, and then
Yeah.
there will be other like moments where if I'm improvising, you know, on like a big tour where there's like two like 50-inch screens, like
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna play it kind of safe and just play
Yeah.
some
I
shit I
mean,
know how to do.
those completely non-musical factors weigh
Yeah,
in to your fucking musical improvisation. It's like, dude, when we're sitting in a club, 90% of the time my audience is full of fucking guitar players. So the
right,
trap is I'm going to play something to make them excited every second. You know what I mean? And
right,
it's like,
yeah,
well, that's not really what I'm hearing though at this moment, and
hmm,
what I would
yeah,
play just given my own devices. But sometimes it happens though. Sometimes you want to do something to make somebody go ooh, you know,
yeah.
or
And to
sometimes
know that
people are
you have
fucking
that in your back pocket, yeah,
yes.
is
Yeah.
and being able to like wield it responsibly.
Yeah, or sometimes maybe they're fucking being loud and not paying attention to you, and you play something to get their attention, or you go the other
Yeah,
way and you break down dynamically, or there's so many things that can influence an improvisation that are not musical in any way. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. All right. All right. Well, cool. That was a good sidebar,
yeah.
dude. All right, number 6. What do you feel is your biggest weakness on the guitar?
Man, where to start? uh, Honestly, like one thing that I've been working on in quarantine, where like I've checked out, I've gone down the Josh Smith rabbit hole, is is like my right hand,
Okay.
and just sort of like I technique like was never something like I really like worked on aside from like the transcribing element. Like I've never really paid attention to like how I hold the pick.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how other guys hold the pick, and like I didn't pay attention to like do I use my fingers most of the time or like am
Mm-hmm.
I, and so I really I felt like I was in a place where um I was not as fluid as I wanted to be, like I couldn't quite express like the way I wanted to express. I was kind of like just weighed down by like lack of facility, and so I just like yeah I spent months of like doing a deep dive into right hand technique, um, and like took like I would ask friends like can you just show me like how do you hold the pick like, and paying attention to like yeah where how other people were syncing these two things up,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah that I think I've gotten a little better, but still like I'm definitely not the most like technically uh proficient guitar player. um
Well, it's amazing how much technique is driven by, you know, the actual like want to play some sort of piece of vocabulary. It's like you normally won't
right,
put in the time to learn the technique unless you just have to know that piece of music or that vocabulary.
yeah,
But then that
right,
changes your whole fucking life. It's like, so yeah, when I tried to start learning Danny Gatton vocabulary, it was like, well, if I didn't learn the technique, I couldn't play the vocabulary. So it was like, but
yeah,
then that changed the way I played all guitar for the rest of my life.
Mm,
You know? Yeah.
yeah, because you do a fair amount of picking fingers,
Oh yeah. I mean, it's all the time.
and
You know, it's oh yeah.
that came from. Did that come from the Danny Gatton stuff?
100%. It was,
Yeah.
trying to play some of those banjo type things that he played and those double
Mm,
stops with the dead notes and all that stuff. And it was
right.
physically impossible to do with just the pick. Because before that point, I
Yeah.
played with my fingers anchored down on the pick guard and just to pick like
Yeah.
this. And
Do you
yeah,
still?
it was
Are you
overnight.
floating most of the time now?
Now I'm floating all the time. Yeah, I'm floating
Yeah.
all the time, just like this. Yeah, but I mean,
Right.
it changed the way that I play. Well, lost my guitar. Anyways, it
Huh.
changed the way I played rhythm. It changed, all of the. It
Yeah.
changed the way I
Dude,
play
your
guitar.
rhythm
Just in
thing
general.
is so deep too. I feel like people don't hear you do that stuff as much as the lead stuff, but even just the
Yeah.
scary pocket stuff that we did, your yeah, your right hand, like the rhythm stuff
Thanks,
is
man.
frightening.
Well,
It's
I worked
frightening.
equally as hard on that, and I was lucky too as a kid to have like guys lay into me, adults like. Dude, we don't
Hmm.
care that you can solo good for a kid. Like, you're in the band, like, you have a job. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you got to do your
Yeah.
job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Totally.
crazy. Well, I don't know what happened to my guitar, but we'll come back to that. All right. Who's a huge influence on your guitar playing that people would be surprised to hear?
Ooh, good question. Um, People would be surprised to hear. Um, well, maybe I don't know. Andrew McKay might be just because no people don't know who Andrew is, but Andrew aged now. He changed his name, um, but uh, but yeah, I used to go listen to him play in college, and like and I got some like bootlegged recordings of him just playing like um, a seventh. What's that place called? Man, it's been so long since we've been able to go hear music. Seven grand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And yeah. So like I'd take Andrew's playing apart, and I just felt like he had like a unique, such an expressive way of playing that like made me feel like I got to figure out how to do that.
That's cool, man. Man,
Yeah,
is he still in Hawaii?
he's still in Hawaii. Yeah,
Yeah. Crazy. Crazy.
yeah,
That's a talented family.
so talented.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Danny, I love Danny to death, man. Always will.
I know. They both just breathe musicality. They do
Yeah.
everything they do. It's effortless and tasteful.
Yep. 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 Uh, okay. On a gig situation, would you rather have a good guitar and a shitty amp, or vice versa? A great amp and a crappy guitar.
Um, I'll take I'll take the good guitar. I'll
Oh,
take the
okay.
good guitar. I mean that if you feel like you're fighting like that side of things, that can be frustrating. It's yeah, somebody who's had to deal with a bunch of backlined 335s and whatnot.
Mm.
Or you look surprised. You would take the
I'm the
opposite. You take
opposite.
the
I'm
amp.
the opposite way. Yeah, I'd rather
Yeah,
have whatever. I mean, nah, it's got to at least be playable. But I'd rather have whatever guitar with my amp and my pedals and something comfortable than like this
yeah.
guitar and a JC 120. I'd be much happier the
Right,
way.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure out like that you really are hearing the amp most of the time rather than the guitar. You know what I mean?
People don't
But
give
it's
it
just
enough consideration. Not even just the amp,
yeah,
the speaker. People, you got
yeah,
there's a whole fucking generation, not generation, but group guitar player community who have never changed speakers in their amps. They just don't question it. They get an amp and it's got a
right,
speaker in it and whatever. It's like you realize that's the last thing in the chain, and it's what you're actually hearing
right.
is the speaker.
Yeah, but it takes work because even just to realize what a difference an amp makes, you kind of got to line a couple of them up and then A/B them, and then
Yep.
same thing with speakers. Like try a couple different speakers in the same amp and really
Yep.
hear how they push down differently. I feel
Hmm.
like most 99% of people don't really get to a place where they do all that. But
You're
yeah, I
right.
think I think for as far as like what's gonna make the best sound, I think you're right. They're like amp and pedals probably matter more than the guitar, but I just hate fighting shitty guitars. So
I get
I'll
it.
take comfortability over
Yeah.
sound.
All
Yeah.
right. Fair enough. Fair enough. It's been
Yeah.
split 50-50 on the answers with everybody.
Really?
So, yeah. Yeah. Well, and some of it, a lot of guys are tied to certain instruments are a very big part of their performance. Like so much so they couldn't even do the gig unless they had like that guitar. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Interesting.
I get it.
Interesting. Yeah.
All right, number 9. What keeps you motivated to learn new shit? So yeah, we're in the quarantine, and you say you've been working on your right hand,
Yeah.
but like, what keeps you going and pushing to be better tomorrow than today? Because it's a super obsession for me.
Yeah. Um, that's a great question. Um, I mean, I guess the question is like, what inspires you, sort of?
Yeah, what keeps you wanting to put in the time? Because we all know
Yeah,
guys who reach a level of playing and they don't keep growing. And it's not a negative
yeah,
thing. Being content is great. But we all know those guys who either stop and they sound the same for the next 30 years, or guys who just have new shit all the time and are constantly pushing themselves.
totally,
So, like, what keeps
totally.
you pushing yourself?
I think it's two things. It's the carrot and the stick. The stick being like I'll put myself in a situation where like I can't really execute the like or I'm kind of just dissatisfied with like an aspect of my playing where I just get so frustrated with like where I'm at with a certain thing that it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm not going to be happy unless I work on this. um, and then the carrot being like listening to listening to good music and like listening to good guitar players. Like do you know Pedro? I don't even know how to say his last name. Pedro Martin, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So talented.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When I like that is actually I think what spurred like the like 4 months of just like 8 hour a day like technique practice because I went down. I heard him for the first time, and it just blew my mind. And he just like used his technique in the most musical way, and it
Mm-hmm.
just sounds like everything he does just sounds like so free and like expressive. Um,
But you can also hear the 10,000 hours of technique
yeah,
practice. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He told me we had a couple Zoom hangs, and like he told me about that because I'm always curious like how hard people work for where they are. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there's some people that don't practice and they can just do things,
Yeah.
and then it always makes me feel better when someone tells me about their 8 hours a day for 12 years phase.
Right.
Yeah, he said like when he was a kid, he got like pretty dissatisfied with his playing, and he would just walk around in Brazil with like a guitar like in the countryside and just go on these like long walks and just be like shedding technique. So yeah, for a couple of weeks early quarantine, I just like took my guitar and I was just walking around Highland Park just like ear metronome. You know what I
with
mean?
with a metronome in your ears?
Yeah, I'd have like my headphones and a metronome, and I would just be like practicing like technique stuff, walking.
Could you even
You
hear
know,
your guitar?
I could hear it. Yeah,
Yeah. Interesting.
uh, yeah,
Wow. Well, that's good, man. And yeah, I mean, so much what keeps me motivated is not just, yeah, I want to be better and I want to learn new things, but of course a lot of it is driven by hearing somebody else do something.
yeah,
And not out of
totally.
jealousy, out of pure inspiration. Like, wow, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
Pedro's so inspiring. You're so inspiring. Um,
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
like Nathan and I are working on a record, and he's he's got so much cool shit together.
Yeah, he does.
Blake Mills is like
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. Well,
always inspiring. So
Yeah, dude, inspiration is never more than like 5 seconds away from like
I
it's
know.
really yeah, it's right there. Oh man.
True.
All right, number 10. Do you have a 5-year plan? Is it just to continue what you're doing now and just make it better? Is there a goal that you really, really want to accomplish that is like, oh, this is where I'm headed? Or is it just kind of go with the flow?
Yeah. Um, yes. So it's I feel like for each endeavor, I sort of have an idea of like where things are headed. Um, like Pockets kind of has a plan in terms of like how I would like to see how Jack and I like kind of dream about that going. You know,
Right.
if it keeps going. Um, but yeah, I think the basic idea is to like to stay like inspired and to stay positive and to stay productive. Like I sort of realize that's the thing is like a guitar player I'm trying to balance all the time is like practice versus productivity. Do you know what I mean? Because I feel
Yeah.
like my playing will sort of go up and down, you know, in terms of like how proficient like I feel.
Hmm.
Um, but if I have nothing to show for it, like if I go through a long stretch where I don't record a song or write a new song, then I kind of start to feel not good. So yeah, the 5 year plan is sort of like getting the getting like the live thing going as far as Scary Pockets is concerned when we're able to do that again, and
Right.
growing that as far as like the whole machine. Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of
Yeah.
become
Yeah.
this like weird sort of record label, you know,
Yeah.
like situation. So building that and building the live situation, and then as far as like my music, I tend to be try to be more like process oriented, just because um, yeah, I don't really think about outcomes as much as just like how can I keep myself in a creative place where I feel like going into the studio and making something.
Hmm.
And then you know, just trying to like write and record as much as possible. So those are kind of like the two things. It's like Pockets and how to keep making my own music, and then the other work like the sideman stuff and the producing. I've always felt like I've never. It's not stuff that I've ever felt like I could go looking for. It's always
Yeah.
felt like if I just do my thing, then people kind of get a sense for what my taste is, and
Hmm.
then that stuff just kind of comes and goes. Like sometimes I'll go through periods where I'm working a lot, doing things for other people, and then the phone will stop ringing, and I'll all right,
Yeah.
I go make a record.
Yeah, but the more you put out there kind of what your thing is, the more the
Yeah,
gigs you'll get called for will be rewarding because they're calling you for what you do actually,
yeah,
not just to do a
yeah,
job. Yeah,
totally,
which is
totally.
great. That's a good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. That was it. That was the 10 questions. I appreciate it.
Oh shit,
And
dude, can I just say you're a great interviewer.
thanks, man. I'm getting better. I'm getting better.
Yeah, it's
I got a lot
hard.
of
It's
practice
hard to
already.
do, but I can tell you've done a lot of these because you just have a really good way of keeping things moving and asking good questions. And this is so much
Appreciate
fun.
that.
I can't thank you enough for asking me to do this.
Of course. And for everybody, there will be links to all things Ryan Lerman in the body of this video. And if you're not a member yet, just hit join and become a member. And if you don't want to be a member, at least subscribe because I would appreciate the support. But for members, we'll be back in a minute with the turn two thing. But thank you, Ryan, man. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Thank you, Josh. I have nothing else to do.